Okay, I hope you all can see that. So let's get started. So first, I guess, so welcome to the Introduction to Blockchain and Crypto course. This will be the meeting one. And so first, let's go over some of the agenda. So first, we're gonna do some introductions. I'm gonna introduce myself. And because there's a lot of you, so we might not necessarily get to introducing all of you, but feel free to just send anything in chat. But next, we're going to talk about some definitions, some terminology that we should know and we should be mindful of, and we should know the definitions of throughout the different meetings. Third is a brief history of crypto. I believe that understanding why crypto, or blockchains in this case, was created is important to actually understanding what crypto is, their purpose, their importance, and also blockchain technology itself. Fourth is we're going to go over some of the basic structure of blockchain and why it actually is able to do what it is, why it's innovative, and some of the different characteristics of blockchains that set it different from other systems. Fifth, we're going to talk about the usage of blockchains. So where are they applied to? What company or like what industries use them? What specific cases are they used for? Like why are they actually useful in the real world? And then last, we're going to talk about some final notes and an investing game, which I'm going to set up by next week, which is just something for fun that we can do throughout the 4 weeks. Okay, so first, introductions. I'll just introduce myself really quick. So first is first is my name. So I'm Eric Jin, and I'm a grade 11 student this year. I live in Vancouver, British Columbia, in Canada. And something I like to do is play badminton. So that's a little bit about me. And next, I want to discuss a little about the class environment, which I want to talk about three things. First is on the language. If you don't understand something, or your first language is not English, or your English is not very fluent, just ask, and I'll translate to the best of my ability. Feel free to ask anything in the chat, and I'll respond as soon as I can once I see it. Second is I would like for this class to sort of be a peer-to-peer learning. I don't know everything. I'm still learning too. After all, I'm in grade 11. I'm still a student. So ask as many questions as you can. Feel free to type it in chats. Just say it aloud. Just if you have any questions, if you have any confusions, just feel free to ask me, and I'll answer them to the best of my ability, because it helps both you and you and me learn. And third is I don't want to technically like lecture, because lecture is when a teacher essentially reads out a textbook or reads out some sort of like a website to you. And I don't think that lecturing is very good in general, and specific, and especially not in this context. So I hope this class can be sort of us exploring blockchains and crypto together instead of me just lecturing you on something. So lastly, in the introduction, we're going to go over the course overview. And essentially, we're just going to have 4 meetings. So today is the first meeting. And the first meeting, we're going to go over the basic introduction of blockchain and crypto. So I'm guessing many of you don't actually know what blockchain and crypto actually are. So we're just going to be going over like the general, very broad and very basic aspects and characteristics of blockchains in today's meeting. And again, just an introduction on the history, why they were created, their importance, and how they're used. In the second meeting, we're going to be talking about Bitcoin and other first generation blockchains. So if you don't know, there's technically different generations of blockchains. So for example, Bitcoin's a first generation blockchain because it was it is the first successful crypto to ever be created. So, and there's other earlier blockchains that use sort of different algorithms than later blockchains. Example of a second generation blockchain is, for example, Ethereum, where it transitioned to another algorithm in, I believe, 2020. So yeah, our second meeting will be dedicated to talking about first generation blockchains, the initial sort of structure of blockchains, how they were originally how they originally were when they were just created. In the third meeting, we're going to be talking about proof of work and crypto mining. So you probably heard of crypto mining, and it's essentially just and proof of work is essentially just a more fancy term for crypto mining. And we're going to talk about how blockchains and their algorithms are actually secured, how they're validated using an algorithm called proof of work and crypto mining. And this relates to the second meeting because proof of work and crypto mining specifically relates to first generation blockchains. It's the algorithm that first generation blockchains use to validate their transactions or to secure the blockchain. And similarly, there's also this later generation blockchains, which is why in the fourth meeting, we're going to be talking about second generation blockchains, so blockchains that came more recently, and proof of stake. And staking. So proof of stake is just a newer algorithm that's adopted by some newer blockchains. And staking is just a simpler word for it. I'll explain what all of this means later on in the different meetings and also a little bit today. So don't worry if you're a bit confused right now. Okay, so with that said, let's go on to some definitions of some important terms that you should probably know throughout the course. So first, blockchain. I've mentioned a blockchain many times, and it's probably still not too clear about what it actually is. So what is a blockchain? And what I put here is that it's a distributed ledger-like database that can store information across all nodes. That sounds really complicated, but in simpler terms, a blockchain is essentially think about it as a book that stores all the transaction records of different people that participate on the blockchain. So, for example, if this class were a blockchain, so we would all be participants of that blockchain, and every single time that we initiate a transaction, so for example, if I were to send some money to one of you, then the blockchain would store that in the information of that transaction down. And in the end, what happens is that all the information of every transaction is stored in the blockchain to be compiled and compiled in that blockchain. The second thing we should talk about is cryptocurrencies. So cryptocurrencies often I feel like are the term is thrown around more than blockchains. So more people hear about cryptocurrencies rather than blockchains. But cryptocurrencies, you can think of them as actually supported by blockchain. So blockchain is the support behind cryptocurrencies. And cryptocurrencies are just digital currencies supported by blockchains. So you can imagine, for example, stocks. Where a blockchain would be a stock exchange where stocks are traded and builds and it serves as a support foundation for the different stocks. Cryptocurrencies are the stocks being traded. And third is centralized versus decentralized. You may have heard of this before, and it's just what intuitively what it means. So centralized just means something has a central authority, and decentralized means something doesn't have a central authority. So to put this to give an example, a centralized system is what we are most used to, right? So for example, the Visa is a centralized system, or like traditional transaction systems are centralized because, like for example, Visa is a central authority that ultimately authorizes or validates your transaction, right? If I were to send some money to you through Visa or through MasterCard or through some other type of centralized means, then there is a company or there's an organization or a government agency that actually has to ultimately approve my transaction. They are able to, for example, cancel my transaction. They're, for example, able to freeze my bank account. They're, for example, able to they're, for example, able to control most aspects of a centralized system. On the other hand, a decentralized system means there's no central authority in that system. So blockchains, this may sound sort of strange and not impossible right now, but blockchains, when you send money or when you receive money, there's actually no third party like the government or like Visa that actually has to authorize the transaction for you to send or receive money. So basically, you can think about it as a legal black market transaction where nobody's able to control what you do, but it's still authorized and it's still authorized, if that makes sense. We'll definitely discuss this more in detail later on. And the last term that we should be familiar with is what is a node? A node is a participant on a blockchain. So because blockchains aren't, for example, in-person transaction, in-person transaction formats, like for example, me buying groceries at the grocery store. Participants aren't people. They're seen on at least as seen by the blockchain. They aren't seen as people. They're seen as a computer or some sort of input to the blockchain. So, for example, if I were to send some money from my computer to you, if I were to send some money from me to you, right? Then I would have to use my computer to send that money to you. And so the participant on the blockchain is actually recognized as my computer and your computer, which are known as nodes. Okay, now that we have some of the important terminology down, we can go on to some of the history. And also, if you guys just have any questions on what I say or any questions on the concept, just feel free to ask. So next is a brief history of what blockchains, how blockchains came to be. I believe that's important to give a history, as I said, because it gives context to why blockchains were created, how they're important, and also just sort of what caused them to be how they are. So here's a brief timeline. So first is in 1991. The first main event is in 1991, where two cryptographers, Haber and Sornetta, published their paper titled "How to Timestamp a Digital Document." So Haber and Sornetta are cryptographers, and what cryptography is it's basically the study of how to encrypt things. So often, for like a common example is passwords, right? Passwords encrypt or passwords secure are whatever information is stored inside, for example, our computers. So that's what cryptography mainly aims to study and do. Basically, how to encrypt things. So what Haber and Sornetta did in their paper is three main things. So first is they described what a blockchain is as we know it today. And we're going to discuss what that looks like later on. And second, they actually first conceptualize a blockchain. Right now, it might seem like weird or impossible that a blockchain with its characteristics can even exist. And it did to me too. Like I cannot believe, like it's hard to believe, right? That there's a system where there's no person that actually oversees anything. Everyone just there's no third party. If I were to send do a transaction between me and you, it's just me and you. There's no third party that oversees it. That's sort of hard to imagine. And the third thing is they sort of defined they sort of defined what cryptocurrencies are, and what basically cryptocurrencies are actually is they're just a string of encrypted letters and numbers that give access to all your money. So just like you have a password that encrypts your bank accounts, right? That secures the data of your bank account. Because if you have a digital bank account, after all, most of it is actually just digital data. And what crypto is actually it's a string of encrypted letters and numbers that secure the data to your money. So, for example, everyone's cryptocurrencies, their wallet, cryptocurrencies are held in crypto wallets, and everyone's crypto wallet is secured by a 64 digit long string of letters and numbers that actually basically give them that encrypt the data to their to their money. The second important event I want to discuss is 1998, when someone called Nick Szabo develops a blockchain to support his first experimental digital currency, BitGold. And why Nick Szabo isn't credited with creating the first cryptocurrency was actually because his BitGold doesn't work. It didn't work because of a few problems. The main one of which is that his blockchain doesn't solve the double spending problem. So now what is the double spending problem? So the double spending problem is when people can just reclaim their spent money. So basically they can get a free refund on however much money they spend and spend it again and again and again. And so this double spending problem is actually really important to understand because it's a reason why crypto or blockchains or the idea wasn't created earlier than it was. Because there's no centralized authority, right? It's hard to prevent people from just, for example, it's hard to validate transactions. So if I send some money to you, how do you actually verify without a third party with authority or a credible third party that I actually sent the money to you or you actually received the money? So Nick Szabo's BitGold didn't work because there's nothing to verify that people actually spent the money they spent or received the money they received. So what ended up happening is I can give the money to you, and then I can say, oh, I never sent that money to you. So now I can spend that money again and again and again. And that's why his blockchain didn't work. And why it didn't really work was just Nick Szabo's blockchain, it was unable to develop an algorithm that prevented people from essentially hacking the blockchain and retaking their data. The next important event was Finney's in 2004. Hal Finney, another cryptographer, introduced a system for digital currencies or digital cash known as a reusable proof of work. So in the last major event in 1998, we discussed the double spending problem. Now in 2004, Hal Finney actually solves the double spending problem because his system helps solves the double spending problem by keeping ownerships of tokens registered on a trusted server. So what that means is basically Hal Finney created a server, a blockchain, or some algorithm that that helped him validate and actually verify and authorize the transactions people made and store them, so that people can't retake their spent money or data and spend it again. And then here is where here's the event that might be the best known, which is in 2008, a person or a group of people under the pseudonym, fake name of Satoshi Nakamoto developed the first working blockchain and the first working cryptocurrency, which happens to be Bitcoin. So in 2008, the Bitcoin white paper was published, and the white paper is essentially a paper describing how Bitcoin works and the code behind it. So another really interesting thing about cryptocurrencies is that everything is publicly available. So you can search up the Bitcoin white paper and it's still there. You can search up the Bitcoin source code and it's still there. You can search up all the code and ideas behind blockchain, and they're all available on the internet. And in 2009, the first block called the Genesis block of the Bitcoin blockchain was mined. So you've heard of crypto mining, right? And so Satoshi Nakamoto mined the first block of Bitcoin. And we're going to discuss what a block is, but essentially that started Bitcoin because blockchains are, from the name, a chain of blocks, right? So he started the chain with the first block. And in 2009 to now, there has been development of something coined altcoins, or named altcoins. And altcoins are essentially just any coins that are not Bitcoin. So Ethereum, Litecoin, etc. are all altcoins. And after that, there's also been massive hacks on crypto exchanges. So that's also another important thing to discuss because that led to the development of something called cold wallets. So remember when I said that your money in blockchains is essentially just a string of code or a string of digits, a string of numbers. What happened was those strings were held on online servers, and hackers basically got access to those strings and stole everyone's money. And so that induced the creation of cold wallets, which is where you actually take your string, your private string of that contains all your money, and you actually store it in an offline device. So, for example, USB disk. Um, and there has been like different uh, products for and like different cold wallets that's been developed since. And yeah, so in 2013, the first cold wallet called Trezor, Trezor, was created, and basically it was able to store the data on a local computer or local disk rather than being online. And next, we're going to talk. Now that we can finish a brief recap of history, we can talk a little bit about the basic structure of blockchains.